In this series, I will try to explain how dimensions work and how they interconnect. I don't know how many slides or videos I will make, but we'll see about that. So here we start. So here we start with the third dimension. So the third dimension means we have three dimensions or three perspectives that intermingle or interconnect, so we can have what we call in human life an experience. So the first element or the first player is our self, our mind or the person or the body, whatever you want to take. I will call it a self. We need a self to experience. Without a self, there is no one to experience. So our first dimensional perspective of the third dimension, number one, is the self. Okay, we had perspective number one or dimension number one, the self. Here we have perspective number 2 and 3 out of 3, and the self that is experiencing unexperience. And the experience we can cut into two dimensions or perspective, the beginning and the end. So we have a self that has an experience, and that experience begins at point A and goes to point B. So we have now three perspectives or three dimensions: the self, the beginning of point A, and the end in point B. So now we have three perspectives: the experiencer, the beginning and the end of an experience. So those three perspectives or dimensions are necessary, otherwise we don't have an experience. So the self can cut down his experience from point A to point B and then point B to C and so on. But the underlying unconsciousness is that the self or me or the person or the human cannot stop experiencing. When he stops experiencing, he is considered as dead, and that means you're not present in the third dimension. So here we can see or conclude that the third dimension is the dimension where a self or a human is being evoked by linear time. The self does not have any say whether he's going to experience or not. He is always on the move. He is always experiencing something. He cannot stop the experience. He can only change the direction or the content of the experience, but not the experience itself. If he would do that, he has to commit suicide or something else, but this is not possible from the third dimension on. So one needs to understand what the third dimension is here. The third dimension is a self that experiences something between point A and B, meaning the beginning and an end, and every step he makes, every moment in time, he is making a photo or he is memorizing a frame, and that frame is the film of his experience. So basically, the third dimension is filming an experience, putting it in our memory of a self or a human, and that film is then the memory and is the memory of that experience. So we can consider two things. The point A and B we call a timeline, and every step on the timeline managed by linear time we call a experience. It can be a very small one or a big one, that is for us to decide. We can cut it into pieces or chunks or frames or photos, but conceptually you have one timeline, which is the two dimensions beginning and end of the experience, and every photo on that timeline is every single experience, which of course, and that is also a very important, is a sequence. We cannot change the sequence of the photos. We cannot change the beginning and the end. The beginning is our birth and the end is our death, or the beginning and the ending of a timeline, where over that line an experiencer or a self or a human is progressing, evolving through linear time. So he follows linear time. Linear time is the constant, and the self has no say in taking a photo. He takes photo number one first, then second, then third, and so he takes photos from the beginning of the timeline till the end of the timeline. Why does that do that? That is why the third dimension is there, to experience action reaction. How is frame 1 linked to frame 2, to frame 3, to frame 4? So that progress of evolution is a matrix or a setting or a program based on linear time. Again, third dimension is an experiencer, 2, a beginning and an end, and the third dimension, the meaning is of the learning how to research, memorize, and to master interconnectedness between frame 1, 2, 3, 4, till all experience is over. That is basically what the third dimension means and what the third dimension is about. It's a learning device, how interconnectedness is being perceived in the third dimension.